There are seasons in life when awakening does not arrive through a great upheaval, but in the gentlest way. It appears when you begin to notice what lies beneath other people's words, to feel the falseness behind a smile, to see the fear underneath pride, and to understand that so much of what people display outwardly is only a mask to conceal the shadow within. According to Jung, when a person dares to face their own shadow, they enter a deeper level of awareness. They not only understand themselves, they also begin to recognize the unconscious games unfolding in relationships. But that very clarity can sometimes make others feel threatened, because a person who is not ready to look into their own darkness will often resist anyone who makes them feel exposed. In this video, you will discover 5 things that a spiritually awakened person should never reveal to anyone. You will understand why silence is sometimes not weakness, but a form of self-protection. And if you stay until the end of the video, you may realize that the true strength of an awakened soul does not lie in speaking out everything it sees, but in knowing what must remain kept within the sacred darkness of one's own inner world. Number 1. What you have seen, keep to yourself. When a person begins to awaken, the first thing that changes is usually not the way they speak, but the way they observe. Conversations still happen as before, people still smile, still ask after you, still appear kind. But at a deeper level, you begin to sense that something does not entirely match. A compliment may carry a thin thread of envy. Concern may hide a need for control. Someone may say they want what is best for you, yet every time you become stronger, they somehow make you feel as though you are wrong. What is striking is that you do not see these things through ordinary suspicion. You see them through a quieter kind of knowing, as though your unconscious mind has silently pieced together details your rational mind has not yet named. And when those signs repeat often enough, you understand that people do not live only by the words they speak. They also live through their fears, insecurities, hunger for recognition, unhealed wounds, and the shadowed parts they themselves do not want to admit. During a training session on emotional management skills, I met Liam. He was the kind of man who did not try to draw attention. He simply sat in silence and watched how people spoke about their pain. When one participant shared that she often felt hurt because her family dismissed her emotions, another person smiled and said, "Maybe you just overthink it. Everyone has problems." The sentence sounded ordinary, even like advice. But Liam noticed that beneath it was a very subtle way of invalidating another person's feelings. After the session, Liam gently said that sometimes telling someone, "Don't overthink it," does not help them calm down. It only makes them feel wrong for having been hurt. The other person immediately became irritated, saying Liam was too sensitive, liked picking faults, and always made things more complicated than they needed to be. In that very moment, Liam understood that there are things one sees clearly that should not be spoken too quickly. Because when someone is not ready to face their shadow, they will not hear the truth as a reminder. They will hear it as an attack. Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That sentence matters deeply because it shows that strong reactions toward other people often open a door to understanding ourselves. But not everyone is brave enough to step through that door. For Liam, the other person did not receive the truth as an opportunity for self-observation. He received it as a threat. And when the ego feels threatened, it defends itself, distorts the story, and turns the one who sees the truth into the guilty one. According to Jung, human beings live largely through the persona, the social mask they wear in order to be accepted, loved, and seen as righteous. The persona is not necessarily false. It is a necessary outer layer that helps us move through life. But when a person identifies too deeply with that mask, they become afraid of anyone who can see through it. You may only want to say, "I see that you are hurting," but they hear, "You have been exposed." You may only want to say, "I notice the control hidden in the way you care," but they hear, "My good image is being destroyed." That is why an awakened person must learn a lesson far harder than simply seeing through things. It is to see through them without rushing to expose them. You may recognize that someone is envious, but you do not need to call them envious. You may sense that a person is manipulative, but you do not need to explain every layer of that manipulation to them. You may know that an apology is not sincere, but you do not need to force the other person to admit their falsehood. Because sometimes, the more you try to prove what you see, the more you get pulled into the very maze you are trying to leave. Seeing through things is like the lamp of a traveler in a dark forest. That lamp is not for shining directly into everyone's eyes and forcing them to admit that you can see the way. It is there so you know where the cliffs are, where the thorns lie, where you should place your feet no further. If you use that light to guide your own path, it protects you. But if you use it to blind others, they may grow angry, cover their eyes, or even smash your lamp. Truth is the same. It is powerful when used as a compass. It becomes dangerous when turned into a weapon in a room full of minds not yet ready. What you have seen through, keep to yourself, not because you are cowardly, but because you are mature enough not to waste your awareness. You do not need to tell a manipulative person that you have seen through them. You only need to stop allowing them to manipulate you. You do not need to tell a fake person that you know they are not sincere. You only need to stop placing your heart where honesty is absent. You do not need to announce that you are awakened. You only need to stop reacting as your old self once did. A truly profound person is not the one who always says the sharpest thing. Sometimes, they are the one who sees the chaos in a room with perfect clarity, yet still keeps their breath calm. They no longer need to win every argument. They no longer need others to validate their intuition. They no longer need to explain themselves to exhaustion to those who only want to understand in ways that benefit themselves. They know there are truths that only they need to know. To know in order to step back. To know in order to set boundaries. To know in order not to betray their deepest feelings one more time. And perhaps awakening does not lie in how many people you can see through, but in how you live after seeing through them. If what you see makes you bitter, it is not yet wisdom. If it makes you want to prove you are right, it is still possessed by the ego. But if it makes you calmer, more discerning, less willing to step into places that make your soul shrink, then that perception has begun to become maturity. There are truths you only need to know for yourself. Because the deepest power is not in exposing the darkness of others, but in refusing to let that darkness pull you away from your own inner light. Number 2, the journey of transformation does not need exposure, and after learning to keep to yourself what you have seen through, the awakened person moves into a more hidden lesson. Do not expose your own transformation too soon. Seeing through others is already a sensitive thing, but letting others know exactly what you are healing, where you are changing, where you are still weak, that is a much deeper opening into your inner world. Some processes need darkness in order to sprout. Some changes, if watched too closely, lose their natural unfolding. I am reminded of Nora in Henrik Ibsen's play, A Doll's House. For a long time, Nora lived in the role of a small, charming, obedient wife, called by her husband with affectionate names that still carried possession. From the outside, that home looked warm. But as time passed, Nora increasingly realized she was not truly seen as a mature human being, but as a doll placed inside a beautiful room. What is striking is that Nora's transformation did not begin with a grand declaration. It began with quiet recognition, a little doubt, a little awakening, a little pain in realizing that her life had been defined by the gaze of others for far too long. If Nora had announced too early that she wanted to become herself, perhaps every force around her would have tightened immediately. Her husband would have argued, society would have judged, and her old role would have been brought out like a soft but unbreakable cord to tie her back in place. This is exactly what often happens in real life. When you say too early that you are changing, the people who benefited from the old version of you may not object with open hostility. They may say gently, "You've changed too much. Don't overthink it. You were never like this before," or "Maybe someone is influencing you." Those sentences sound ordinary, but sometimes they are called back into the old cage. Jung once wrote, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. If you do not see the pattern inside yourself, you will continue to meet it again in relationships, in your choices, and in circumstances that seem accidental." That is why transformation is not about telling the world that you are healing. Transformation is about quietly bringing the unconscious parts of yourself into the light of awareness, little by little, in a way that is real and durable. From a psychological perspective, every relational system tends to preserve its familiar structure. In family, friendship, and work, each person is often unconsciously assigned a role: the one who yields, the rescuer, the one who takes the blame, the peacemaker, the one who must always understand everyone else. When you begin to transform, that old role is shaken. You no longer apologize just to keep the peace. You no longer take responsibility for other people's feelings. You no longer try to prove your worth by exhausting yourself for them. And when you change, the system around you is forced to change as well. That is why it reacts. That reaction is not always malicious. Many people are not consciously trying to sabotage you. They are simply frightened when the familiar version of you disappears. They used to know how to soften you, which words made you feel guilty, how to remain silent until you came running to repair things. But when you are transforming, the old keys no longer open the old door. That confuses them. And in that confusion, they may try to pull you back into the person who was easier to control, easier to predict, easier to use. That is why the journey of transformation is like a seed cracking open beneath the soil. If you dig it up every day to prove to others that it is growing, you do not help it grow. You only break the tender roots before they have time to take hold. Inner change is the same. In the beginning, it was fragile. You may have only just learned how to say no, yet still tremble inside. You may have only just realized that you deserve respect, yet still carry the habit of doubting yourself. You may have only just stepped out of an old pattern, yet the part of you familiar with suffering still wants to go back. If you expose all of that before the eyes that are not gentle enough, you can be shaken before you have even learned to stand. This does not mean you must isolate yourself or share with no one at all. Jung did not guide people toward cold closure. But there is a profound difference between sharing with someone who can truly support you and exposing your journey to those who only know how to judge. A genuinely safe person will not use your tenderness to control you. They will not turn your healing process into a story for gossip. They will not force you to explain every step of your growth. They can simply be present like a quiet room where you are allowed to change without performing the role of someone already completely strong. The awakened person must understand that not every step forward needs to be announced. There are days when you win a very small battle inside yourself, perhaps by not replying to a message that would pull you back into an old spiral, by not over-explaining, by not apologizing for your reasonable emotions, by not returning to a place that once wounded you. No one may see those victories, but they are the roots of transformation. If life only pays attention to flowers, Jung reminds us that what truly sustains life often lies underground, in the dark, the silent, and the unseen. All you need to do is keep part of your journey for yourself. Each day, choose one small change and practice it quietly. Speak less when you want to explain too much. Pause before reacting to an old habit, or write down a pattern you no longer wish to repeat. There is no need to tell everyone. There is no need to ask for anyone's recognition. You simply need to be steady long enough for the transformation to grow roots. If this touches something in you, choose a word to leave in the comments, perhaps quietly or growing. Not to announce to others that you are changing, but to remind yourself that the deepest transformation rarely needs applause. It only needs you to be patient enough to protect your earliest steps, quiet enough not to expose every crack, and trusting enough to know that the most sacred things within us often grow best in a peaceful darkness. Number 3. Do not tell anyone your final boundary in advance. The moment you begin to transform quietly, you will realize that not every boundary needs to be announced. When we live largely through our wounds, we often want to explain everything clearly, where we hurt, how much we can bear, and that if it happens again, we will leave. We imagine that stating our boundaries in advance will make others respect us more. But the more mature we become, the more we understand that a boundary only truly has weight when it is no longer a warning, but a calm inner choice. Some things, if they have to be repeated too many times, are no longer boundaries. They become pleas for permission to be treated with kindness. A follower of the channel once left a comment sharing that she had been in a relationship where every time conflict arose, the other person disappeared. No argument, no dialogue, no explanation. Just silence. A kind of silence so cold it made her wonder what she had done wrong. At first, she gently tried to say that it hurt her. Then she clearly said that if he continued using silence to punish her, she would not be able to stay. But the strange thing was that every time she neared her limit, he returned just in time. A short message, a vague apology, a sentence like, "I just need time." And then she would persuade herself that maybe this time he had understood. But after it happened again and again, she began to realize something more painful than his silence. He had not really learned how to love her better. He had only learned the safe distance at which he could avoid losing her. He knew how long to stay silent before she panicked, when to come back so she would soften, how much to say so she would erase her own feeling of having been hurt. Then, one day, she wrote, "I thought I was giving him a chance, but in truth I was teaching him how to cross my boundaries and still keep me from leaving." That sentence is heartbreaking, because it does not only speak of someone who hurt her. It speaks of the moment a person realizes they have unintentionally betrayed themselves while trying to save a relationship. Carl Jung once wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking. One is the shadow of the other." That sentence reaches deeply into the dark heart of relationships that appear to be love, but are actually governed by power. Where there is real love, people do not need to test how much you can endure. They do not need to turn silence into punishment, apologies into hooks that pull you back, or closeness into a reward after each time you obediently overlook your own pain. But where power dominates, love slowly becomes a silent negotiation. Whoever fears losing more must surrender more. From a Jungian perspective, a boundary is not merely a communication skill. It is a sign that the ego is beginning to mature and no longer mistakes love for self-sacrifice. When the ego is still weak, people easily confuse endurance with compassion, constant forgiveness with depth, and staying with loyalty. But in the unconscious, a part of them may be so afraid of abandonment that it accepts being hurt. Another part may use endurance as proof that it loves enough. And another may be repeating an old pattern, abandoning the self in order to keep someone else. That is when love no longer expands a person. It makes them smaller. The most dangerous part of telling your final boundary in advance to someone who does not respect you is that they may turn that boundary into a map. A mature person, when you tell them you are hurt, does not need to be threatened with your departure in order to know they should stop. They care about the effect they have on you. They want to understand, not to win, but to avoid hurting you further. But a manipulative person will hear your boundary as strategic information. They will learn where you begin to tremble, which words soften you, and how much pain you can still tolerate. And they may not stop because they love you, but only learn how to walk right along the edge without letting you truly leave. A boundary is like a fine crack inside an ancient vase. Someone who values it will hold it carefully with both hands, even if you never need to point out where it is fragile. But someone who only wants to test its strength will tap the exact weak spot if you tell them. The human soul is the same. There are final places within you that are not meant to be announced. They are sacred regions of dignity, where you simply know that if someone crosses them, you will not continue negotiating by hurting yourself any further. This does not mean you must become cold or walk away at the first mistake. An awakened person still knows how to speak, can still say, "This hurts me," can still give someone the chance to understand and change. But they also know how to distinguish between a mistake and a pattern. A mistake leads someone to regret and change their behavior. A pattern leads someone to apologize and then repeat it. A mistake may be healed by awareness. A pattern only changes when the person truly wants to face their shadow. That is why sometimes the deepest protection is not in saying more, but in quietly stopping your participation in the cycle. No more long messages trying to prove your pain. No more announcing that this is the last time, only to let the last time become one more time. When a boundary is mature within you, it appears through action that is clear, calm, and without drama. You do not need to make someone afraid of losing you. You only need to stop losing yourself in order to keep them. The deepest lesson here is that your final boundary does not live as what you declare, but in your loyalty to yourself. You can be gentle without being easily violated. You can love without handing your dignity over to someone else to decide. And you can leave a cycle that is no longer love without turning that departure into one final performance of explanation. When you stop announcing your final boundary in advance, it is not because you have become colder, but because you have understood that what is most sacred in a person should never be brought to the bargaining table. Number 4. Sacred wounds are not for the crowd. Have you noticed that after learning how to guard your boundaries, the next thing that most needs protection is the hidden wound deep within your soul? Because there are pains that, if given to the wrong person, will not be received as sacred truth. They will be turned into stories for comment, points of weakness to touch, or labels by which others continue seeing you through an old image. Not every wound needs to be told. Not every memory should be placed before the crowd. And not everyone who knows that you once suffered will know how to honor that pain. On the path of awakening, there is a very special stage. The wound is no longer only the place where you were harmed, but slowly becomes the place where you understand yourself more deeply. A person who was once abandoned may learn the value of presence. A person who was betrayed may learn clarity within trust. A person who was never truly seen may become more sensitive to the loneliness of others. But precisely because the wound has gone through that transformation, it should not be brought out as a story anyone has the right to touch. There are things within the soul that are like an ancient temple, not because they are weak, but because they are sacred. And what is sacred is not for noisy footsteps. In Greek mythology, Chiron is a very special figure. He is a centaur, but not wild like the others. Chiron is wise, skilled in medicine, music, hunting, and the teacher of many heroes. Yet Chiron himself bears a wound that cannot be healed, caused by a poisoned arrow. The paradox is that the one who heals others cannot fully heal himself. And from that wound, the image of the wounded healer becomes a profound archetype in Jungian psychology. A person does not become deep because they have never suffered, but because they have gone through pain without allowing it to turn them hollow. Carl Jung once wrote, "The doctor is effective only when he himself is affected. Only the wounded physician heals." That does not mean every wound automatically turns someone into a healer, nor does it romanticize suffering. Jung was pointing towards something more subtle. Only when a person has truly been touched by life, truly understands pain, not through theory but through experience, can they meet another human being at a deeper level. But that only becomes strength when the wound has been made conscious. If it has not yet been clearly seen, it can still make us react, defend, cling, or unconsciously seek validation from others. From a scientific point of view, this is close to how modern psychology views traumatic memory. A painful experience does not live only in the story we tell about it. It also lives in the body, in stress responses, in avoidance patterns, in the signals that make the nervous system feel danger even when the present is different. When a person tells their wound to someone who is not safe enough, they may not feel lighter. they may instead be reactivated into shame, exposure, or disbelief. That is why healing is not about telling everything to as many people as possible. Healing begins with choosing the right space, the right person, the right moment, and enough inner strength not to lose yourself inside your own story. This is why sacred wounds are not for the crowd. The crowd is often more curious than understanding. They want to know what happened, who hurt you, how you got through it, but they are not always refined enough to hold that story with respect. Some listen to love you. Some listen to judge you. Some listen so they can bring it up again at the exact moment you are weakest. And some listen only to feel less alone themselves, while unconsciously pulling you back into the role of victim you fought so hard to leave. A wound is like a piece of amber holding the trace of a vanished time within it. If looked at through rough eyes, it appears to be only a strange object. But if looked at in stillness, one understands that it contains time, pressure, loss, and the miraculous preservation of life. Your wound is the same. It is not an object to display before every gaze. It is the memory time that has compressed into understanding. If you hand it to someone who does not know how to value it, they may only see the crack. But to someone deep enough, they will see a kind of light that could only be formed by passing through darkness. What matters is that you do not mistake privacy for shame. You do not hide your wound because it is shameful. You protect it because it has become a sacred part of your inner journey. There are stories that should only be told to someone capable of remaining silent after hearing them. There are pains that should only be placed in a space where you do not have to prove that you suffered enough. And there are memories that, before being shared with anyone else, need to be held first by your own gentleness. If you still tremble each time you tell the story, then that story still needs more time to be supported within you. So the practice here is very simple. Choose one wound you often feel tempted to tell in order to be validated, and for now, keep it in a private space. Write it down, not to expose it, but to listen to it. Ask yourself what it has taught you, where it still makes you react, and what part of yourself you need to protect from this day on. There is no need to share it yet. There is no need to turn your pain into an explanation for everything. Simply let it remain in a place quiet enough where it is not judged, not compared, and not forced to become an inspirational story too soon. Thank you for staying with me to the halfway point of this journey. Pause for a second and place your hand over the memory you once had to hide in order to keep living. If this touches something in you, leave 1 or 2 words in the comments, perhaps wound, understood, or I keep it. There is no need to tell the whole story if you are not ready. Sometimes the first healing is not in telling everyone, but in finally knowing that your wound deserves to be protected with tenderness. Number 5. The ability to read people deeply should be concealed. After learning how to protect the sacred wound, the awakened person comes to the final lesson. Do not let everyone know that you can read the human heart. When consciousness becomes more refined, you begin to notice very small things: a pause before an answer, eyes that turn away, a smile held a little too long, a sentence that seems casual but reveals what is being hidden. This is not magic. It is the alertness of a mind that has observed deeply enough, suffered deeply enough, and is no longer easily deceived by surfaces. In ordinary life, This happens very quietly. Imagine a small meeting where people are discussing a shared decision. One person says they completely support it, but their voice is dry, their arms are tightly folded, and their eyes repeatedly turn toward the most powerful person in the room. Another laughs loudly at an opinion, but that laughter contains no joy, only the need to hide insecurity. The awakened person may recognize that the whole room is performing a polite play. Everyone says what should be said, but no one is saying what is truly happening. And this is exactly where caution is needed. If they immediately point it out, the room will not thank them for being honest. The room may turn against them for exposing the collective pretense. Carl Jung once wrote, "The mirror does not flatter. It faithfully shows whatever looks into it, namely, the face we never show to the world because we cover it with the persona, the mask of the actor." When you have the ability to see through the persona, your presence can become a mirror that is too honest. And not everyone is brave enough to stand before a mirror that does not flatter, especially when it reflects the very part they have tried to hide from the whole world. From a Jungian perspective, the issue is not that you see more. The issue is how you carry that ability into the world. An awakened mind can quickly sense envy, defensiveness, shame, hunger for power, or fear of abandonment in others. But if you reveal that you can see all of it, people will feel as though they are standing under a spotlight. Human beings can accept being loved, advised, even challenged. But very few can bear the feeling of being seen too clearly before they are ready to see themselves. The ability to read people deeply is like hearing the background music in a silent film. Others only see the characters walking, smiling, bowing, falling silent. But you hear the note tightening before tragedy arrives. You feel the sorrow beneath a cheerful sentence. You recognize the sound of fear inside a boast. But if you keep telling people that you can hear that music, they will think you are exaggerating, or worse, they will fear you. Because to them, the world is still silent. Yet you are responding to layers of sound they have never learned to hear. That is why the awakened person must learn intentional ordinariness. Not pretending to be blind, not lowering their awareness, but allowing that sensitivity to work quietly, like underground water feeding roots, without rising to the surface just to prove it exists. You may know that someone is anxious, but let them have the space to say it for themselves if they choose. You may feel that someone is being defensive, but you do not need to name that defense immediately. You may recognize that someone has been performing a role for too long, but sometimes the kindest thing is not to tear the mask from their face in front of the crowd. This is very different from tolerating falsehood. Concealing your ability to read people does not mean allowing them to harm you. It means you do not use your awareness to make others feel stripped bare. You can still keep your distance. You can still choose not to trust completely. You can still leave an unsafe situation. But you do not need to say, "I know what you are thinking." That sentence rarely brings the truth. It usually only brings defense. The deeper a person truly becomes, the less they need to display their depth. They do not turn intuition into a performance. They do not use their power of observation to make others feel small. They understand that the human psyche is a house with many locked rooms, and just because you see light under the door does not mean you have the right to walk in. Some rooms open only when their owner has enough trust, enough maturity, or enough weariness with their own mask. Before that moment, intrusion, even if accurate, can still become a kind of psychological violence. So keep that ability as a sacred faculty, not an identity. Do not need others to know that you can read the atmosphere in the room. Do not need them to confirm that you see clearly. Let that ability help you choose gentler words, the right distance, and a wiser silence. If you truly see through things, you will understand that everyone is carrying some fear, some concealment, some unhealed part. And that understanding should not make you colder. It should make you more compassionate and also more discerning. In the end, the ability to read the human heart only becomes wisdom when it is joined with humility. You do not need to become a mirror placed in the middle of the crowd so everyone is forced to see their true face. Sometimes you only need to be a still lake, clear enough to reflect all things, deep enough not to be disturbed by every ripple, and quiet enough not to tell anyone what you have seen. The awakened person is not the one who exposes every mask. It is the one who understands why human beings need masks, knows when to see through them, and knows when to let silence become the highest form of compassion. In the end, the awakened person does not need to move through life as someone constantly trying to prove that they have seen more, understood more deeply, or become more aware than others. There are truths that become diminished the more they are spoken, not because they are unreal, but because they are placed in spaces not quiet enough to preserve them. In such moments, silence is not avoidable. It is a form of protection for the most sacred part of the soul, where the deepest realizations do not need the crowd's recognition to hold value. Through the lens of Carl Jung, awakening is not about standing above others, but about returning closer to oneself. You learn to see through things without rushing to expose them, to transform without noise, to love without losing your boundaries, and to understand others without turning insight into power. A mature soul does not use awareness to defeat anyone, but to live with more clarity, more gentleness, and without betraying the deepest part of itself. Perhaps after all, those 5 things are not merely secrets that must be hidden. There are 5 doors leading you back to a deeper life, where strength no longer lies in being seen, but in the ability to safeguard the light within. When an awakened soul knows how to be silent at the right moment, it does not lose its voice. It simply learns that there are truths meant to be lived more than explained. And if this journey has touched some quiet place within you, gently press like, subscribe to the channel, and continue with me into the deeper mysteries of the human mind through the vision of Carl Jung.